Hello and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. A man walks to his driveway to get the newspaper just as dawn breaks in a suburb of New Jersey. He sees smoke coming from his neighbor's home. He calls the newly formed emergency telephone service called 911 that had only been in use for a couple of years and tells the operator to send the fire department. As firefighters arrive, they see smoke billowing and flames rising from a very familiar location. A location many of them had spent one of the worst days of their lives in. The home, locally called the murder house, was on fire. This is the story of family annihilator John List. Let's get into it. There are so many differences among us that I like to explore the very few things that we all have in common, no matter what the circumstance. That idea is how this channel was born. We all eat and we all die. Those two things are two of the very, very few things that all human beings have in common, but there are others. We all have a father and we all have a mother. Within that common thread that ties us all together, we all have very different definitions of what a mother is and what a father is. 1971. Before the home is known as the murder house, it was a beautiful 19-room Victorian mansion in Westfield, New Jersey. At the time of its construction, it was named Breeze Knoll. Living there was a 46-year-old accountant, John List, his wife, Helen, and the couple's 3 teenage children. Also living with them was John's 85-year-old mother, Alma. The family is devoutly Lutheran and are active members in their community church. John List is known as a deeply religious man. He's introverted, he is soft-spoken, and he's well-regarded. The family had lived in the sprawling home for 6 years and were known as great neighbors and friends who didn't have any serious problems and were living a usual and quiet life in American suburbia. November of 1971. Each of the schools where the List children attend receives a letter. At this time, Patricia, who went by Patty, was 16. John List Jr. was 15, and Frederick was 13. The letters sent to the kids' schools were written by John List. They said that the family had decided to leave town for a while and that the children would be missing school for a few weeks. The letters also stated that the family had a seriously ill relative and the family was needed to assist in that relative's care. The List home sat vacant and quiet, and the children missed school, but their absence did not raise any alarms because of the letters the school had received notifying the administrators that they'd be gone. Neighbors noticed lights on inside the List home, but figured the family had left them on for security reasons. The lights were actually left on for so long, and the family was absent for so long that the lights began to burn out. Soon the house was almost dark, and neighbors begin to grow suspicious. The List family has been gone for a long time, a very, very long time. Finally, a couple of neighbors decide it's time to alert authorities to the family's absence, and they half expect to be told that the family is safe and well and have left word that they will be gone for an extended period of time. That is not what happened. December 7th, 1971. 2 officers are dispatched to investigate the neighbors' concerns. It has been almost a month since any of the List family members have been seen. The 2 officers walk the perimeter of the house. They don't find anything out of the ordinary. A neighbor walks over and tells police, "I think they're just on vacation, but some of us are worried that the grandmother didn't go with them and that she might be in there. They've been gone a really long time." Police feel this concern is valid and that it is enough reason to enter the home to ensure that the elderly woman is not in there alone in distress. One of the only lights left on is coming from the 2nd floor of the home, and it is providing just enough light to create an eerie glow on the 1st floor.
Looking around the house, and there was a light coming from the 2nd floor, which sort of lit very eerily the 1st floor. Just enough light that you could get around, but not with very good vision.
They passed through the butler's pantry into the kitchen. There they noticed what appeared to be bloodstains on the floor.
And the unnerving part of the whole situation was that there was music playing in the house, and it was a very classical, serene, almost like you would hear if you went to a funeral parlor.
The officers begin to feel a little spooked because in addition to the singular light bulb shining from the second floor to the first, soft classical music is playing throughout the home. They stop and look at each other with confusion as to why the family would leave for a month and not turn off the stereo. As the officers walk through the family kitchen, they see dark stains on the floor of the butler's pantry. Now, this house is actually a mansion. It is so large that it has a ballroom. The entrance to the ballroom is covered with heavy formal drapes that the officers then pull back so they can shine their flashlights into the large room. There is no way to prepare them for what they find. There on the hardwood floor of the ballroom lay bodies in a row. They are partially in or on top of sleeping bags. Some of the bodies' heads are covered with cloth and some of the bodies are face down. Officers call out into the dark room, "Westfield Police, please stand up." There is no response, not even a flicker of movement. Patricia, Frederick, and John Jr. are in a near-perfect row. Their feet are lined up and they have been placed on a thick blanket. Helen List is lying to the side of her children. As the officers approach the bodies, they see clear and visible gunshot wounds to the heads. John Jr. actually has several. Officers get on the radio and call for backup. They have a mass murder. While the two officers wait for backup, they split up to search the rest of the gigantic home. They are aware that John List and his mother live in the home, and their bodies are not with the rest of the family. Both officers recall thinking the murderer could still be in the home. One officer remembers thinking, "I wish I hadn't just watched Psycho," because each time he turned the doorknob to a different room, he was afraid someone was going to jump out at him. I think sometimes we forget that police have to do some really scary things on a regular basis. Backup arrived, and now more officers begin to search the massive house. After about 45 minutes of going room to room, they arrive on the third floor of the mansion. There, in a back room on the top floor, they found Alma. She had a gunshot wound to the head, and her face was covered with a blanket. She had fallen to her knees in an attempt to escape, and then had fallen backwards when she was shot. The List family was not on vacation. They were not helping an ailing family member. They were dead inside the family home, each and every one of them, with the exception of their father, husband, and son, John. Any question as to who had committed these atrocious acts didn't last long. In John List's study, officers found a 5-page handwritten note penned by John List and addressed to his pastor. The letter was dated November 9th, 1971. In the letter, John List takes full responsibility for the murder of his entire family. John List had been hiding a secret for a very long time, and it was a secret that was about to be revealed. John List was broke. He had mismanaged the family's money so badly and had lied about his employment for so long that the family was about to be homeless, forced from their mansion, and John List was going to have to declare bankruptcy. In the letter, John states that he cannot bear the thought of his family facing a life of poverty, especially after spending so many years living in a mansion. He writes that the world is an evil place and that he had killed his family to save their souls. He states that he is at peace, knowing his family is in heaven, and then adds, "P.S. Mother is in the hallway in the attic, 3rd floor. She was too heavy to move." Oh, that just, he's taking the lives of his own children because he will decide for them that they are too weak to face their lives. He decides he will take their very lives from them before he will let them decide for themselves how to handle life's challenges. Just the level of evil and desire for control over not only other human beings, but how those other human beings perceive him. You see what I'm saying? It's sickening to me, to be quite blunt about it. That kind of ego is scary, really scary. As police continue the search of the home, they discover that John List has spent time, quite a bit of time, cleaning up the crime scenes, mopping up blood, and wiping down decor and walls that were soiled by the murders. They also discover something else. John List has gone through the entire house, has opened every single picture frame that contains a photo of the family, and has cut himself from each of those photos. This man wasn't content to just erase his family. He also wanted to erase himself from his old life. He wanted to erase all proof of the life that he had had with them because he was done with them. He had made an incredible mess of their lives together, and he was walking away and leaving that behind. December 8th, 1971. A nationwide manhunt is launched in hopes of finding John List. Extra police officers are brought in from neighboring precincts to aid in the search. 2 days after the bodies are found, John List's Chevy Impala is located at JFK International Airport. John List is now officially a fugitive. He is on the run. He is wanted for mass murder, and he has a month head start on authorities. January 1972. Neighbors and friends and church members associated with the List family are brought in. The story each and every one of them give police is the same. John was quiet, he was religious, he was introverted, he was respected, and everyone who knew him was in absolute shock over what he had done. Some neighbors even stated that they didn't believe the note and felt John was being set up because the John they knew would never do anything like this. People can become very unsettled when their perceptions are challenged, can't they? Some people seem to get more upset about the fact that what they thought was true turned out not to be true than they do about the horrible things and crimes that are committed against actual victims. It's a phenomenon that I have watched for years and years, but never quite ceases to surprise me. It's just really hard for some people to come to terms with what they thought was real was not real. And the mental gymnastics, tournament begins. American police begin working with authorities in Mexico, Canada, South America, and Europe. The entire world is looking for John List, but John List has vanished, and there will be no sign of him for many, many years. 1971 to 1988. After the murders of his family members, John List takes his car and leaves it at JFK International to throw authorities off. He then gets on a train in New Jersey and goes to Colorado, Denver to be precise, and starts a new life there. He starts a new accounting job, calling himself Robert Peter Clark, and tells people to call him Bob. Now, John went to college with a man named Robert Peter Clark, and that's where he takes the name from. John then takes a job as a controller at a paper box manufacturer outside of Denver and works at that company from 1979 to 1986. He joined a Lutheran church and even ran a carpool to take church members around on errands if they didn't have a car or couldn't drive. At one of these church events, he meets a woman named Dolores Miller, and the two of them are married in 1985. In February of 1988, the couple moved to Midlothian, Virginia, and John, still calling himself Bob Clark, takes a job as an accountant at a small firm called Madrea, Joyner, Kirkham, and Woody. John List walked away from that old Victorian mansion, the bodies of his dead family members, and into a whole new life. May of 1989. The hit television show America's Most Wanted featured the List family murders and the disappearance of John List on its program. Now, for those of you who are much younger than I am, America's Most Wanted was an event. I know it's still on, but back then it was like Monday Night Football. Everyone watched it. Everyone wanted to be the next person who solved a major crime. We didn't have a lot of true crime shows back then. It was kind of the big one. It actually was the big one. These types of shows were brand new, and people were very interested in them. There was no forensic files back then. Half of the country didn't even have 24-hour news channels yet. America's Most Wanted was where a lot of people found out about the crimes that happened across the country and who the FBI was looking for at that time. I actually remember exactly where I was when I saw this episode of America's Most Wanted because they did something that I had never seen before. I was living in a tiny little apartment in Cedar City, Utah. I was 19 years old. My baby was about 9 months old. I was working as a receptionist at a telemarketing firm called Nice Corporation. My friends had all gone off to college, but I had gotten pregnant in high school like any good little Mormon girl does. And so I was home alone with a baby all the time. My husband at the time worked long hours, and when he wasn't working, he played a lot of sports, softball and golf, and frankly, I spent a lot of time just me and my little baby in our apartment. I was sitting in this old gold plush recliner that my mom had given me, and I was watching America's Most Wanted, and I distinctly remember this episode because as they discussed the John List case, they brought out this gigantic clay bust and set it on the table. At least that's how I remember it in my mind. Let's look. And I thought, what is this? And they then explained that there was a new technology called age progression. They explained that scientists believed they could take an old photo of someone and predict how that person would look after they had aged. Well, this was all new to us. We had never heard of such a thing, age progression. It was an entirely new concept. They told the story of this quiet, fatherly man who had committed this atrocious act. I was shocked because I had never heard of a case where a parent killed their own children. That was all new to little old sheltered 19-year-old me. They talked about how the man had vanished and authorities were still looking for him. For some reason, I remember them saying they thought he might be in Sweden at the time. That stands out in my mind. They basically had no idea where he was, but they had this aged, progressed bust, and they felt confident that someone watching the show, which again was hugely popular, would recognize John List as an older man. The whole thing was really captivating to me, and it stands out in my mind as one of the cases that ignited my interest in true crime. And guess what? It worked. June 1st, 1989. John List is at the accounting firm he works at. The secretary enters his office and says, "The police are here for you." He stands up, he's handcuffed, and he is taken into custody. One of his former neighbors in Denver had alerted the police to John List's whereabouts and the fact that he was calling himself Robert Peter Clark. After speaking with more people in Denver, they found out that John and his wife Dolores had moved to Virginia, and from there it was easy to track him to his place of employment using his banking records. After 18 years on the run, 18 years of evading national and international law enforcement in one of the largest manhunts ever conducted, they had him. March 26, 1990. Psychiatrist Stephen Simmering begins meeting with and evaluating John List. A lot of new information comes out in these interviews. John List tells Dr. Simmering that his life was a series of disappointments and failures. He says he believes Helen, his first wife, lied to him about being pregnant in order to get him to marry her only 3 months after meeting, and then claimed that she had a miscarriage. John said he never confronted Helen and tried to, quote, make the best of his marriage to her. Dr. Simmering says John List is a deeply repressed person. He cannot express emotion and never ever reveals what he is feeling inside. The doctor said he's not even really sure he has emotions. Kind of like Debbie Dean, the Ice Queen from our other episode. There are people that just don't feel anything. They're like reptiles. And no, I'm not saying I believe in lizard people. It also comes out in these interviews that the family had been forced to move around a lot because each time John got a job, he was fired, not because of poor work performance, but because of his personality. People didn't like him. They didn't like being around him. He made people uncomfortable and they didn't want to interact with him. But after moving around for a while and not being very successful in his jobs, John was hired by First National Bank of New Jersey as a vice president. He claims Helen immediately went house hunting and set her sights on this mansion, an enormous, sprawling home that John says he never wanted to purchase. In order to purchase the home, John had to borrow money from his mother, and then in return, he told her to come and live with him, and they would kind of take care of her. The family photos from this time period look normal enough, but their life was not normal. Both John and Helen drank heavily, and they fought almost constantly. When John's mother moved in, the problems just got much worse. Alma was stern and kind of overbearing and did nothing but create more tension in the home. In 1966, John is fired again from his job at the bank after only a year. So what does he do? He hides the loss of his job from his family. He would actually get dressed every morning for work, get on the train, and pretend he was going into the city to work, but he would simply wander around the city or sit on a park bench for hours and hours each day. He finally did find another job, but that didn't last long, and he kind of took job after job in order to keep up the facade, but none of the jobs that he got and then lost were enough to pay the mortgage on this huge mansion. John says he contemplated taking his own life, but he thought that was a sin. I guess killing your whole family isn't? I mean...
I kept thinking about it for several weeks, I'm sure, maybe even a month, and my final solution was that if I would kill them, that would save them from any problems. I felt that even though I killed the family, I could still get forgiveness eventually from God.
John List was a religious man, but above all else, he was a proud man. He would never allow himself to admit to his family that he was a failure. The story he tells is that he believes God would forgive him for killing his family. I cannot. He says he knew it was wrong to kill them, but eventually God would understand why he did it, and eventually he would be forgiven. Well, I guess that's all that matters, John. Not that you took your family's lives away from them, not that you didn't allow your children to grow up and make their own decisions. All that matters is you, and that you're forgiven. He then goes into cold, emotionless detail about how he waited for his children to leave for school, went to the garage and prepared the guns, then walked back into the home and shot his wife as she drank her morning coffee. He then walked to the third floor where his mother rose to give him a kiss. She said, "What was that noise?" John says he replied, "That's why I came up, to see what it was." His mother walked to the doorway to look downstairs, and John murdered her where she stood. He then spent the afternoon cleaning up the mess, dragging Helen's body to the ballroom, and writing the letters that he would send to the children's schools. He then went to the bank and withdrew $2,000, dropped the letters to the schools in the mail, and put a stop on all incoming mail. Then he returned home, made himself a sandwich, ate it with his dead wife and mother in adjacent rooms, and waited for the children to arrive after their day at school. This man is a monster. He is a monster among monsters. Patty is the first to come home. Her father sneaks up behind her and shoots her in the head. He moves her to the ballroom. Frederick comes home next, and he too is dragged into the ballroom after being shot. John Jr. Poor John has a soccer game after school. His father actually goes and watches the soccer game and then drives his son home. As John places his soccer bag on the kitchen counter, his father shoots him in the head, but John does not fall. He turns around and faces his father. John then shoots John Jr. 9 more times. John List tells the doctor that after the deeds were done, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief and spent the evening relaxing in the home. That makes me feel sick inside. Just what a selfish prick. It just, ew. After his relaxing night, he straightened up the kitchen and went to bed. He said he had a better night's sleep than he had had in a long time. The next morning, he turned the thermostat to 58 degrees to keep the bodies from smelling. He then turned on the lights and turned the music up to make any possible intruders believe that there was someone home. Well, someone living in the home. He wrote the letter to his pastor, left it on the desk, and walked away from his life. April 12, 1990. John List is convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. At sentencing, he tells the judge, "I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was not accountable for what happened." He later said he rarely thought of his family and that they very quickly became a distant memory for him. At no point in time did he show any type of emotion, let alone shed a tear. March 21st, 2008. John List dies of pneumonia while in prison custody at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. He died on Good Friday. He was 82 years old. When the press reported his death, they called him the Boogeyman of Westfield. That house fire, the one I talked about in the beginning of this episode, if you ask a New Jersey local who started it, they might tell you it was a group of witches from a devil-worshipping cult who were using the house to do rituals in. They might tell you it was just a group of teenagers. The old Victorian mansion that burnt to the ground reportedly had real Tiffany glass in the domed ceiling of the ballroom. Had John List just looked up and realized what it was, he could have sold it and solved all of his financial woes and then some. Instead, he laid the bodies of his family members under the very thing that would have saved their lives. The burnt remains of the murder house were removed, and in 1974, a brand new home was built in its location. The home stands there still, and many residents in the area say they have never gone inside, and they never will. Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. It helps me a lot. Stay safe and be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.